Are you sick of me talking about M1 chips and MacBooks and iPads and Sony XM4s and Mac Minis? Why don't we take a slight break from tech, sort of, and do a bit of a Q&A? Hello and welcome back to Ellis Reviews, and thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't subscribed, the button is just down there. So this channel is now in its second year, which I can't believe. It's gone ridiculously quickly and it's been a ridiculously crazy ride. We're at 32,000 subscribers, 2.5 million views just over, and there's just loads of other things that have happened all around it that have just kind of completely blown up out of all proportion. So firstly, thank you so much for being involved in that and doing what you've done, which is watching this content. But more importantly, I've had loads of really interesting questions from you guys on YouTube, on Twitter, on my Discord server and elsewhere. So I thought, why not do a little bit of a Q&A? So I reached out on YouTube, on my Discord server and on Twitter and said, ask me anything. I'm probably going to regret this, but let's get into it. So the first question comes from Shane Layton, and he says, what are the 5 most essential apps that a new to the Mac OS user needs to install right away? Quite tricky, that one, Shane, because it depends entirely on what you're doing with the Mac, I suppose, really. For me, I obviously install things like Final Cut and Logic Pro and all that sort of stuff. In terms of like standard everyday things that everyone can use, I don't install a lot of them really. I use things like Clean My Mac X, not sponsoring this video by the way, but that's very good for cleaning space and all that sort of stuff. Get yourself a really good email client, and unless you use mail, fine. A really good calendar app, because I think the default calendar app in macOS isn't great personally. Then maybe a good to-do list app. Again, you could use reminders, but I'm not that keen on reminders either. And really just any of the tools that you need to get going. Like I say, I don't really have many standard apps. Maybe Dropbox, you know, if you want a really good way of storing files and sharing them across devices, Dropbox is quite a good one. Sorry, Shane, that's not the best answer, but I think it's very dependent on how you use your Mac and what you do with it, really. Right, next question is, what is your one absolute hard no when it comes to tech? A device / app / company you won't touch with a 10-foot pole. That comes from Jonathan Bailey. I think it's anything that costs too much money and you don't get any value from it. A really good example of this actually is Apple's, what do you call it, their auxiliary cable, which you can use to plug your AirPods Max into a normal headphone jack. That was, I think, 35 quid in the UK, and it's the worst cable I've ever purchased. Flimsy, horrible, does not need to be that price. I would not recommend that to anyone. So anything, and it's not just Apple that does this, lots of tech companies do it. Anything that costs too much money and doesn't give you value, that really annoys me. If there's no justification for it being X price, then it shouldn't be that price. Next question is from Andrew Dodman, and he says, can you say more about the work you do in Logic? Any links to some tracks, etc.? So just for the uninitiated, Logic Pro is a music production piece of software. I've used it for many years, and I'm not a professional musician. I've done some stuff on stage with a band and what have you, but that's a long time ago. But I've always been a bedroom music producer, and I have been since about the age of 12. It's something which has been quite dear to my heart. I haven't really released anything, but I do have stuff on SoundCloud, which I'll link to in the description if you want to check it out. It's stuff I've not done anything for a long time, and I haven't put anything on there for a long time, but you can check out my older tracks. In terms of what I do these days with Logic, it's pretty much all related to this channel. So whether it be producing the audio that you're hearing now, so the mic that I use, that all goes through Logic and I process it to make it sound as it sounds now. I did a video on that a little while ago, which I'll link to above if you want to see a bit more detail on that. The little ident thing that you hear at the start and end of my videos, which is that is me. That's been produced on Logic. It's part of a little track that I put together a little while ago. And obviously the 8 or 16 podcast with Rob and I, which is all produced on Logic. I'll put a link in the description if you haven't heard it already. We've got 8 episodes now. It's good fun. I do miss producing music, and when things quieten down a bit, which they never will, but whenever I can find a bit more time to get back into music production, I'm going to do it, because it's, like I say, it's been a passion of mine for many years, and it's just time really, but we'll get there. Right, next few questions actually are from someone called Wee Scamp, who does comment quite a lot on my videos, so Hi WeScamp. We'll start with the first one, which is what are your top non-Apple accessories or kit you wouldn't be without? That's quite straightforward. They're not in this room at the moment, but it is the Sony XM4s, which are my noise cancelling headphones of choice. I did a longer term review of these recently, which I'll put a link to above. I absolutely love those headphones. They are definitely my favourite piece of tech outside of the Apple world. He then asks cats or dogs? Dogs. I don't mind cats, but definitely dogs. Tea or coffee? Coffee. Most OMG, what have I done moment with a piece of technology? Actually, this happened quite recently, and what I did, I filmed an entire bunch of A-roll, and the way I do it, technically, is that I speak into this mic, which is just out of shot. That mic goes into a audio recorder, so at the end of every shoot, I stop the camera, stop the audio recorder, and transfer everything onto the Mac and get editing, basically. This one particular day, I stopped the camera, didn't stop the recorder, opened the SD card tray, pulled the SD card out, and lost the entire recording. That was an OMG moment because it was actually quite a good A-roll. I can't think what video it was, but it was that moment of pulling it out and thinking, what have you done? And I had to record the whole thing again. Horrible. So on with WeScamp's questions. What's your favourite way to unwind after a day's work? Dog walk, spend time with my girlfriend, and chill out watching TV and eating food. Will you upgrade your Mac Mini if the M1X or M2 version comes out? That's a really good question. So my M1 Mac Mini at the back here is basically my video editing station these days. I'm pushing it slightly, I think, with the footage that I'm using for my Sony FX3. I will be replacing it with something. Whether or not that is going to be the next Mac Mini, I don't know. It might be the next 16-inch MacBook Pro. It might be something else. Who knows? I need to see what Apple does next. That's not the best answer, really, but I want to see what Apple does next before I decide what my production machine becomes. And WeScamp's last question is, do you like pina colada and getting caught in the rain? I think I would. I've never done that, but yeah, I'd quite like to get caught in the rain with a pina colada at the moment. That'd be very nice. Next question comes from Ibrahim Hussein, who says, what would be a better purchase, iPad Pro 2020 version for a discounted price or the M1 iPad Pro, both 11-inch models? And he uses it for gaming, video conferencing, and the odd bit of video editing. I think if you can get an iPad Pro, the 2020 version, the non-M1 version, for a really good price, get it. I just don't see the point in the M1 iPad Pro at the moment, personally, and my 2018 iPad Pro is as fast as the day it bought it. So if you can get the 2020 version at a great price, Ibrahim, just go for it. Next one comes from Alberto Reza. I hope I've got your surname right there, Alberto. He says, wanting to switch to a mechanical keyboard, which one would you recommend? This is quite straightforward. There's two companies that I always recommend with mechanical keyboards. The first one is Keychron. They do some fantastic keyboards. Check out the K2 and K3, I think. Very affordable and very well made and just very nice to use. The other one is Iquinix, and a lot of their stuff is on the windowsill behind me. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're very well built, and they are my keyboards of choice, actually. The F96, which is attached to the Mac Mini behind me, is my daily driver on that Mac, and I love that keyboard. Again, not cheap, but very, very good. Next question from Bhargav Kumar. I really hope I haven't butchered your name there. Apologies if I have. But the question is a 512GB MacBook Pro enough for daily use as a student? It depends on a couple of things. One, your budget. If you can afford that size device and you need it, then just go for it. I think buying remorse is a horrible thing, and it is nice just to have a single device with all the storage you need. If it is a bit of a stretch though, and that's why you're asking the question, I wouldn't bother. I would just get the maximum amount of storage you can afford, and then just use external storage, because external storage is relatively cost effective these days. It's certainly more cost effective than upgrading Apple's storage prices. So actually, yeah, go for as much as you can afford and just add external SSD storage. The next one is from Robert Pepe. Again, Robert, I really hope that's how you pronounce your surname. And he asks, I'd love to hear more about your time without your Apple Watch. So if you don't know, I swapped my Apple Watch for a G-Shock watch for a whole month. That was about 3 or 4 months ago. And since then, I only pretty much wear the Apple Watch during the week when I'm working. I don't tend to wear it at weekends. I tend to switch back to the G-Shock, which I love that G-Shock watch. I think it's quite simple. I didn't miss it at all. I really didn't. And I think what I found I was doing with the Apple Watch before I had that break was not very much. I was kind of starting and stopping timers, starting and stopping workout routines. There were more habits than things that were benefiting my everyday life. And you miss notifications a little bit, but you also don't miss them because it's quite nice not to have your wrist vibrating every 10 seconds. So it was absolutely fascinating, Robert. I'd recommend it. I think if you've been wearing an Apple Watch like I have since the launch of the first version, have a break from it. Either have nothing on your wrist or go back to wearing a traditional watch. I love traditional watches. I do miss wearing nice watches. So it was definitely a really good little exercise, and it has kind of removed what I thought was my reliance on this device, which doesn't exist. So give it a go. Have an Apple Watch free month and see how you get on. Next question comes from Stephen Carr, and he says, what Mac product would you take to your desert island? Really simple answer, M1 MacBook Air. Best laptop I've ever owned, does everything I need it to do. It can do very simple things. I know that it's got hidden power that I can use if I need it to. It would just be my go-to device for a desert island. I did a bit of an update on my use of that machine recently. I'll put a link above, but yeah, that would absolutely go straight in the bag. Next question comes from Ian Azagi, and he says, do you have shares in Superdry? No. Sarah Chicharo, I really hope I've got that right as well, asks, chocolate or vanilla ice cream? Vanilla, every day of the week. Next one is from Sarthak Kandalwal. Again, really hope that's how you pronounce your name, apologies if not. And the question is, should I get the AirPods Pro considering I'm an Android user, but I have the M1 MacBook Air? I think if you have the M1 MacBook Air, yeah, because you'll find yourself using them a lot for conference calls, video calls. Slightly old-fashioned way of putting it. They're such a good pairing with a Mac that would make the most sense. And as you probably know, you can use them as regular Bluetooth headphones, so they'd work with your Android phone as well. So yeah, go for it. They're awesome headphones. Magic LBJ says, what new technology are you looking forward to having this year? Ooh, that's an interesting one. What bit of technology am I looking forward to having? It's definitely not the iPhone, sorry. It might be a new Mac if Apple launches a new Mac before the end of the year. I'm not convinced they're going to. And I'm also not convinced, if they do, what that will be. Yeah, I'm quite excited by what's going to come next with the M series chips. So I think that's probably... The other thing, actually, thinking about it, is the next versions of the Bose Quiet Comfort headphones, which are the Bose Quiet Comfort 45s, I think. And I've got them on pre-order. They'll be coming fairly soon. I'm very excited to try those out because I've not had a pair of Bose headphones for a long time. So yeah, either the Bose headphones or the next Mac. Ashvara Krupa says, what was your first MacBook, and tell me about your experiences of it? So the first MacBook that I owned was a MacBook Air 11-inch. It was that tiny little 11-inch version they did probably about 10 years ago, and I loved it. It was absolutely fantastic. The size was lovely. I spoke recently in a video about the fact that I many years ago, I got into using netbooks, and I loved the concept of a netbook, but I never really had a very good experience with the actual day-to-day use of them because they weren't very fast, the batteries weren't very good, and they just didn't really live up to the expectations I had. So the 11-inch MacBook Air did, big time. Had great battery, as I say, the size was lovely, and it was a Mac, and it was Mac OS, which I'm a very big fan of. So yeah, that laptop was a special one, really, and kind of went from there. That's where all my money went. Craig writes, and this is his name on Twitter, Craig writes, he's also on the Discord server, hello Craig. Where do babies come from? Now, I know Rob and I tried to answer this on an episode of 8 or 16, and we didn't do a very good job of it. Put it this way, Craig, Mummy and Daddy love each other very much. And next one is from Andy on the Discord server. Hello, Andy. And he says, without revealing Rob's last name, this is Rob on the podcast, do you know his last name? Yep, I do, and I'm not telling you. Another one from Discord, this is from Justin Cox. Justin is brilliant, by the way. If you want to follow him on Medium, I'll put a link in the description. He writes some very interesting articles. He's also a massive Ted Lasso fan, which explains this question. Ted Lasso is a fan of his homemade biscuits. What makes your favourite biscuits and or what makes a good biscuit? My favourite biscuit by a country mile is the chocolate hobnob. I don't know if you can get them in America. I'm not sure. I think they might only be a UK invention. I think McVitie's make them, and you feel fatter after every one that you eat, but that's why they're so amazing. They're just absolutely delicious. And as for what makes a good biscuit, I think if you dissect the chocolate hobnob, it's quite dense. It's very dense, it's very sweet, and it has chocolate on it. And also, very important for a British person, is that you can dunk it in your tea. It's a brilliant dunking biscuit. So you can put it in your tea and you can leave it there for a good few seconds without any worry that you're going to pull the biscuit out and have half of it still in the cup. So it's a brilliant dunking biscuit as well. It's got everything going for it, the chocolate hobnob. It's just amazing. I want one now, actually. haven't got any. But Justin did follow this up as well. He said, also, bonus for your US audience, what is the difference between a biscuit and a shortbread cookie? Shortbread over here, it's a kind of thing that you get when you go to Scotland usually. I love shortbread actually, it's a very sweet biscuit thing. Shortbread cookie, I don't know if it's just that as a cookie. Don't know, Justin. Sorry. Answers in the comments, please. Last question comes from Storm Guy, awesome name. And he says, do you use your MacBook for any gaming? No, I don't. I used to be a gamer. I used to play games quite a lot back in the day, but that was always on consoles mainly. Although if I go right back, I was a PC gamer for quite a while as a kind of kid. Yeah, I don't have time to play games these days, really. It's any spare time I have, I spend with my girlfriend and walking the dog and watching TV and stuff. So I kind of fell out of games a few years ago when they became so complex and just long-winded to play. You know, you needed hours and hours of time to invest in them, and that kind of removed the fun for me, really. And I know that you can get some great kind of pick up and play quickly games. That's great. And I do keep saying as well on the podcast and to Rob that I will spend more time in Apple Arcade on the Apple TV, which I'll do at some stage. But yeah, going back to your question, the Mac is not a gaming device for me personally. I know it can do it, but yeah, I don't play games. Well, that was fun, and I hope I answered your questions sufficiently if you asked one. Now, if you do want to get in touch with me and ask me any other questions beyond this video, I'll put links to my Instagram and Twitter profiles in the description. Now, if you've still got some time and you want to get a bit more of an insight into what goes on behind the scenes of this channel, then keep watching for a link to a video that I did recently where I talk a bit about the blogging toolkit that I've built and one app in particular that makes it absolutely incredibly important to this brand. But in the meantime, thank you as always for watching, and I'll catch you next time.